Hey Mail, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Not bad. We're back on YouTube today, so if people are watching, thanks for coming and joining us. There's a few things I want to talk about before we get into like the Apple event stuff that we have this week. It's a very major Apple event, historical. But the first thing is I'm 10 episodes done with Long Way Up on Apple TV Plus,
Hmm.
and there's one more. And it wasn't clear to me that there was going to be one more until I got like near the end of episode 10, and there was not a conclusion yet, and like it wasn't even close. And so, a few hours. Episode 11 comes out, and that's the finale. And then what I do next is I go back and finish the first two seasons of that show. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. They went to the volcano and stuff in 10. It's cool.
Yeah. I went to a motorcycle shop today to pick up my bike from having some service done, and there was an older guy in there, and he was asking me about my bike and everything, and like what I was looking at next, and I'd said, "Oh, the electric is what I'm curious about," and I mentioned the live wire that they ride on the show, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to test drive one of those this weekend at this festival." He didn't mention the show, but it was neat that it's kind of out there in the culture. So that was neat. The other thing I want to mention is HomeKit. Philips Hue apparently has done the update to their lights
Hmm.
where they now work with the HomeKit
Adaptive lighting.
adaptive lighting, right? Where it's like warm lighting and in the evening hours and dawn hours, and it's very cool lighting during the day. And I'm actually like in my new place in Orlando, my all my lights are they're all lamps and they're all Hue. And so before I wasn't going to really benefit from that because I was using all Lutron in a house. Now I've got Hue everywhere, and so I after this show I will go through the update process and try it out. But I'm really looking forward to it because I've like been manually doing the change on my own, and having it be built in is cool.
Yeah, and I think Elgato's Eve strip lighting also support it now if you have those certain models.
Yeah, so that was a couple of weeks ago, last week or so, and it
Yeah,
was
I think
like
it's last week. Yeah.
it's they were first, but I think there's like a big difference of like the whole Hue ecosystem
Yeah.
and like one specific light, strip from a
100%. Like,
specific brand. It's like now
Hue,
it's out there,
Hue popularized the whole smart home light thing, right?
right?
Hue was easily the forefront runner in just like the consumer brand of, because before Hue, which is starting in what, like 2013ish,
Hmm.
where it started to come on like my radar at least.
Yeah,
You had like the X10 systems and those weird like really super custom like smart home stuff that would it was like earlier versions of HomeKit, like, but really obscure, and you had to have like special remotes and weird like servers. It's like the equivalent of doing like a Plex server today. Like, it was that level of like involvement, right? And
right.
then Hue started to popularize, just bright lights, colored bulbs. And then when they adopted like HomeKit in 2015 or whatever it was, it really started to kick off for sure.
Yeah.
And they what they do leads the industry. So the fact that they now have adopted adaptive lighting pretty reasonably soon after after iOS 14 came out. Like, when it was coming later, I was worried a bit. I was a bit nervous it was going to be like, the CarPlay features that are always coming later, and then it takes them, 2 years for them to show up in the car at all, with the HomeKit stuff. You know, Case in point, HomeKit video doorbells still basically missing in action,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But
There's one,
adaptive lighting at
maybe
least seems
two
to be
coming.
realized.
Yeah, yeah. So those two things, Long Way Up finale on Friday and adaptive lighting to test out as soon as I finish recording this episode with you. Also this week, I haven't dug into these because I've been just doing so many things, but iPhone 12 mini and iPhone 12 Pro Max reviews are out. What's the verdict there? I kind of caught like what the mini, the concern there is that battery life is not what we're used to in larger phones, of course,
Correct.
and that the Pro Max camera benefit is measurable, but not for everybody. And it's not like between generations of phones.
Yeah, obviously we're just basing off the reviews that were released under the embargo, and people start getting them starting tomorrow. Actually,
Yeah, yeah,
starts coming out on Friday. The mini, uh, people seem to love the size, and it is identical to the 12 in basically every way apart from the screen size.
hmm
And then the battery life, yeah, I feel like if you're going to the mini, your battery life's moving back down to like iPhone 7, iPhone 8 levels. So if that's what you're coming from, then it's going to be about that range. That's at least what it seemed to. The impression I was getting from reading the reviews, but you're not going to get the markedly impressive battery life that you've seen from like the 11 series, basically. So
Yeah.
it's
The other thing with the Pro Max is though, I've got the 12 and 12 Pro review units, and there's in the same dimensions. There's certainly a big difference in the weight in your hand, with the Pro being much heavier because of its stainless steel frames versus aluminum frames. And that's the same thing on the Pro Max, except it's even bigger. It's a heavier phone, even if it wasn't for the stainless steel. You kind of think like if they weren't using materials as like part of the price difference there, that if you were just to say we want to make a bigger phone, then you would make that optimized for size, and that one would be made of aluminum because you want to minimize the weight impact there. I really didn't think a whole lot about that before, but with the previous phones, but partly because the 11 uh, 11 no modifier it was medium sized, and so you had a healthy middle there. And you still have medium sized phones, but if you want the big phone, there's not one that's like the biggest, best camera and also light.
right. Yeah.
It could be an opportunity in the future. There seems to be a lot of, I've been listening to more podcasts lately, and just and having more free time, and there seems to be a lot of agreement in that the lighter materials are sometimes preferred, and that they're also cheaper. I love the stainless steel versus the aluminum. Like, to me, having both as review units, I can choose which one I want to pick up and take with me. And it's not just the telephoto lens. That's a big deal for me, but just the premium materials too. Like, it just feels much nicer to me. But it doesn't seem like that's consensus, at least.
Oh yeah, a lot of people have said they actually prefer how the 12 feels, just the
Mhm.
aluminium sides. And I do think the colors are probably better on the aluminium phones because you get like the punchier reds and stuff, whereas all the
Mhm.
Pro colors are more muted. But I don't think that's not really the sides, like the material of the sides. That's just the colors Apple picked to stain the glass,
Yeah.
basically. And the
Yeah.
aluminum does have that shine. But if they were doing like jet black with stainless steel sides, that'd look really cool and be more of a throwback to the iPhone 4. But
Yeah.
the Pro colors are more muted.
I could argue though that there is some flashiness to the Pro. Like, I saw the gold in person,
Mm-hmm.
and the rails of it, the stainless steel of it is nice. There were reports that it was like it had a separate coating that made it less fingerprint prone, and the one that I saw was just covered in fingerprints. The back of it though is kind of the same color gold that we've seen over the last few years for that frosted glass, and to me that just did, like, the rails look really nice, but the back of it, I didn't love the way that looked. The graphite one is just so gray. Like, the glass is just like very gray. The silver one though, like if you compare the silver, or the white colored iPhone 12 Pro to the iPhone 12, which is
Mm-hmm.
also comes in white and silver, it's much flashier, like much punchier to have the Pro model there because it's reflective and not dim down. But and then the Pacific Blue is the one that I really prefer. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're not here
Uh,
to talk about those that this week.
so Mini was like, good phone, but battery life might not be what you're expecting if you're coming from, 11 or even like a 10s, say, especially if you can use 5G on it, because it's just that, like the Mini has ultra wideband, right? So if you're going to do a lot of ultra wideband surfing, you're going to drain a lot more power just by de facto.
Right.
The Pro Max reviews, I think it was kind of mixed. Like,
Okay.
some people said that the camera did make a big difference. Like, The Verge was very emphatic about, the camera quality actually being like way ahead of the pack. But some of the other, I think most of the reviews basically said like in daylight conditions, taking a photo on the 12 is the same as the Pro Max. It's only in like when you're starting to get into the lower light scenarios that the extra, the wider lenses that can take in up to 87% more light or whatever is actually going to make a difference and be noticeable. So yeah, the camera is definitely better, but it's not. I took away from the reviews that you shouldn't buy the big one just because the camera is slightly better. Like, you should buy the big one predominantly because it's a big phone and you want the big screen, because that's what you're gonna have to live with day in and day out. And for the most part, like 7 out of 10 photos or 8 out of 10 photos that you take on any 12 are gonna look the same as what you get on the Pro Max, basically.
Yeah, I think that I'm like the prime candidate for the Max version for the camera differences. And I'm pretty close to posting my 12 and 12 Pro impressions. and just here are pictures of like my kids and even like some rockets and cool things like that, and all different lighting scenarios. But I take so many pictures where low light, where even in night mode comes on. So I feel like I'd benefit from that phone. I have like tested out. There's 2x on the Pro, and then on the Pro Max there's 2.5x, and that's such a subtle difference. Like I've faked, doing the optical zoom into 2.5x. It's like that was the only difference. It wouldn't be worth it for me. You know,
Yeah.
because that's a very minor difference there. I think it's like, what is it, like 52 millimeter to 65 or something like that.
And a
But
couple of the reviews actually noted that you get better zoom on that zoom lens, but there was slightly more grain in the actual photos compared to the 12 Pro.
Okay,
So
interesting.
it's not an all out win. Like there
Yeah,
was a
that's
bit of a
an
grain
area of
difference.
improvement for next year then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we saw that the Magsafe Duo and the leather sleeve appeared on the Apple Store, but they're still listed as coming soon. But we do now know how much they cost. A whopping $129 each. So
Cheaper than I would have guessed.
I think we were guessing what 150.
For the sleeve, like I don't care. That's a lot of money for that
Yeah.
product. For the MagSafe Duo, it's if it came with a brick, it would be a totally reasonable price. It does not come with a brick. You need like a very specific brick to get the best charging experience. Yeah, but that's, I mean, I thought it'd be like 149 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you add up the Apple Watch magnetic charging dock, which is just the Apple Watch part on its own in a
Yeah,
magnet
that's
that
80
stands up and down, that's
Yeah.
$80,
Yeah.
and then a MagSafe charger is
It's
$40. So that adds to 120. So Apple adds $10 on for the convenience of having it in this nice little foldable book.
and none of them come with bricks as far as I
Another
know.
income with bricks, indeed.
Yeah. Okay.
We also had, this incredibly compressed Apple News timeline. We had
Yeah.
the HomePod mini orders go up. I pre-ordered one. It's supposed to be coming on the 19th, not the 17th, which even though I ordered it like as soon as I could, so I'm a bit annoyed about that.
Yeah.
And also there were HomePod mini reviews that came out today. It seemed generally positive, but a lot of the comments were, it sounds good for its size, but the equivalent like Amazon Echo $99 speaker is bigger in size and has better sound. So if ignore the pricing, the HomePod Mini is closer in size to like the modern Echo Dot and sounds way better than the Echo Dot. But if you go up to the $99 Echo that's bigger in size, it sounds better. But the HomePod Mini is small, so it's good for its size. But if you're looking for like a mid-range one, maybe you should be going to the Amazon options, which actually tails back to the rumor last week that Apple was considering a mid-range HomePod, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because right now they have the super high end and they have the, well, what we're figuring out end with HomePod Mini. That's interesting. I didn't do a pre-order out of fear of how I would receive it, because it was the first time in my new location where I'd receive packages and I just didn't know what the process was like. I've since figured it out, but I'm near 3 Apple stores, and I think that I know HomePod on release day, that was easy to just stop into an Apple store and get. There's plenty there. There was no crowd. It was all like everyone that was there for opening was there for a Genius Bar appointment. So and it's kind of nice that it's not on iPhone 12 mini and Pro Max release day either, because if it was, that's probably what they're avoiding is that mixing that, I guess. But
Especially when they're trying not to have too many people flooding the stores all at once.
yeah. So I'm just gonna try to get one in a store. Did you get black?
Yeah, of course. It's also funny if you look on the pre-order page at the moment.
Yeah.
The white one's like a week sooner delivery because they pushed out to like the first week of December, and then the space gray ones are another week on that. Like people who have the original HomePod, that the one to get is the gray one because the white one gets 2 day.
Yeah. You get 1 or 2.
One at the moment.
Okay. I will get 2 for the stereo pairing to experience
Yeah.
that.
If I get one and I'm really happy with it, of course I'll get more.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to like dive too hard in at the start because I
Yeah.
do have ultimately the two big HomePods in stereo pair in my room at the moment.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's HomePod Mini reviews. Like we mentioned, both of us plan to get them next week. Yours will come at the mercy of the delivery person, and hopefully I will find one in one of the Apple stores near me. So and I will get white because I will put them on tables that are black, and I think it looks cool to contrast. So
I mean, I think the white looks better statically,
okay,
but in terms of living with it, everything I've seen, the white one gets super dirty, and the grey one does still get dusty and dirty, but you can't see it as much.
that's certainly true. Yeah. All right. You want to do a break here?
Let's do a break.
Cool.
App Figures is all about giving app makers the tools they need to get more downloads and revenue. You may already know them for analytics and App Store optimization, but now App Figures can help you track competitors, from how many downloads they're getting to how much money they're making, audience demographics, and even which software development kits they use in their apps. And competitor intelligence features give you great context. Say a rival app adds a new feature or was mentioned in the news. With App Figures, you can see if that actually brought in more downloads. Have you got a great idea for an app or a game? With App Figures, you can figure out how big the market is ahead of time to get a rough idea about how much money you could be making with it. Whether you're growing your app or building a new one from scratch, App Figures has the tools you need to reduce risk and get more downloads. You don't need a large budget or a data science degree to do this kind of thing anymore. App Figures just makes it affordable and simple. On top of the tools, App Figures also provides a lot of guides and tutorials to take you step by step through gaining more visibility with App Store search optimization, increasing your revenue by learning from your competitors, and so much more. Head to appfigures.com/on/happy hour to try App Figures for free. If you like it, you can use our special code HH3030 to get 30% off for the next 3 months. That's appfigures.com/on/happy hour and use our special code HH3030.
Thanks, App Pickers, for sponsoring the show. The Apple event. This is one of the things that caught my attention at the very beginning was Tim Cook coming out and saying, this is again one of those like produced, pre-recorded videos because of the situation that we're all in. And Tim Cook was like, it's like astonishingly, we're in a third event in 2 months or something like that. It's like, well, yeah, because they're all an hour long or less.
I do wonder when they record these things, like these videos, because theoretically,
Loves to Dream knows when.
Yeah, well, of course he does, but theoretically, they could have recorded all 3 of these at the same time.
You're right. They got the Apple TV production crew out there, and they just knock it out in one.
Yeah, and they've just been holding on for them for 2 months. Like,
yeah.
I mean, presumably that didn't happen. They do actually record them differently, but it's like they only just did the October event. Maybe they did them together. Like just putting it out there. Like, and I think it was pretty clear that Cook intro this time was like, okay, we get it. This is it for now, right? Yeah. We had the September event, we had the October event, we had the November event. He said something like, this is our fastest pace of product releases ever or something. They love those kind of lines.
Yeah.
Which I'm not actually sure is true because
I agree.
I feel like total number of products released across the 3 events is basically the same as what they'd normally do across the September and October event, probably, right? Because we're only it's not like we're having 4 products per event. It's just like 2, 2, and 2.
Yeah.
So, or in this case 3, I guess. But you know what I mean? Like I couldn't quite agree with his underlying pronouncement there, but I get what they mean. Like there's, you're not used to having 3 events, and obviously there are compressed timelines. Like it's so rare for us to be talking about HomePod Mini orders, reviews, plus iPhone 12 Pro Mini reviews, iPhone 12 Pro Max reviews and orders all in the same week. Plus the event, like that kind of compressed timescale never normally happens. So I do get it, but
yeah, most we've had 2 events back to back, and it's usually like September and then November.
Yeah, and you've got a spaced out time period for the orders of the previous event to actually ship, and for like, we next week we'll be doing like HomePod Mini hands-on, but in a normal year you wouldn't have products that were announced like a month ago not be out before the next event happens. So yeah. I get what they were going for, but he was very clearly out there at the start to say, look, we're done for now. Don't expect another event in 2020. We'll see you in 2021 for even more stuff. They did have an annoying thing where he went, they did like a reminder of everything that they had announced, and they started by showing a slide which had the Apple TV on it and like a load of Macs.
So you thought there'd be an Apple TV update?
I was like, they were like, we've done these great upgrades, and the Apple TV comes on the slide, and it went 2 operating systems. I was like, God damn it!
Oh no!
I thought he was about to say we're going to put A12X in the Apple TV. I was like, no, operating systems only. Okay, but that was from 100 to 0 in about the space of 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So very clearly, we're not going to see like AirTags or AirPod Studio or the Apple TV update this year. That's clearly pushed off in 2021. Just like any Mac event these days, they started with a black and white video showing a load of famous faces using the Mac. I always think it's interesting when they do these to like count how many of the laptops are still old models, and you can very easily tell that by looking at the Apple logo and seeing if it's lining up or not. And the vast majority of the laptops still in these videos they show are older versions with light up logos. I don't know if that means anything, but
it means that Macs have a long lifetime.
True. Yeah. So after Tim Cook left the Apple Park Cafe, which is where they seem to set it this time. John Ternus appeared to start introducing the M14 chip.
M14 is M1?
Why don't I say M14?
Because you have it in the notes as M14, but it's M1.
You know why it's an M14? Because it's like an A14.
It's an A14, yeah.
But it's an M1.
But better.
That was clearly a clever play on words that I did subconsciously.
Totally.
So basically, the framing of this is that Apple Silicon, so the brand Apple Silicon, is at the heart of iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, and now they want to bring that to the Mac as well. Similar to the language they used in June, they very clearly laid out that we are developing a family of chips, and today we're introducing the first of those, which is the M1. And I thought it was interesting. They directly said M1 has been optimized for our most popular low power systems where small size and power efficiency are critically important. And then Ternus kind of passed. At this point, I was like ready for them to say, and here it is inside the new MacBook Air. But they kind of made like the M1 a product of itself, like in the installment of the event length, right? Like
that's correct. And in planning our coverage, we had planned out the assigned authors to each hardware product, and in my current position, I didn't plan to write anything. I just planned to watch the event and help out a little bit. And then I was like, I guess I'll write about the M1, and that was like the next half hour. It felt like
because the event was like 50 minutes total, and they spent a good 15 minutes just talking about the M1 chip itself before they actually, in the abstract, before they applied it to any particular product. So this is Saruji's section, basically talking about the technical details of the M1 chip. Unsurprisingly, it does seem to be very much based on the A14, but souped up. Like, if this was an iPad event, it probably would be branded the A14X, for instance, right? But because it's for the Macs, they've decided to go with the M1 name, which I'm actually very happy about, because back in June 29th, I actually tweeted, there was chatter about what they're going to call it, not Apple Silicon, and I was like, I know they've used the M line before for the motion co-processors, but I could see them just like forgetting that and using M1.
The M1 chip.
An M1, yeah. And indeed, if you go on like the iPhone pages now, they don't even like mention the motion co-processor on the tech specs page, so you can't even confuse it if you try and find like an M7
we got past I don't think we ever had like an M3. I think it was like M1, M2, and then they just
they didn't start at 1 with the co-processors. They started at like 7, because it started in the A7. So they had like the M7, the M8, the M9, and then I think they kind of just like stopped mentioning the numbers.
Yeah, I think pretty soon on it was like just part of the A series chip. It wasn't, because it wasn't separate from it after that.
Right. Yeah. But I think M1's a cool name.
It is a cool name. Yeah.
It gives an opportunity to restart the numbering at 1, because if you look at the iOS side, we're starting to get into insane territory with A14, A15, A16.
Yeah,
they've got a while to run.
The only thing that caught my attention is that the Intel chip, when they had that super, low power, could enable the 12-inch MacBook to, fanless and an operation. That was called the Intel Core M chip, and so it was, in that case, like M for mobile. This is M for Macintosh, and this is not, even though it's their popular low power systems, it's not, a slug like the Intel Core M was, and eventually Intel started branding their Core M chips to be like i3,
i5,
even though they were the same structurally. It was just a branding thing, because this Core M had a bad reputation, and now we have the M1 chip, which is nothing like the Core M.
Yeah. So unsurprisingly, the M1 combines the CPU, the GPU, the I/O, the T2 coprocessor for security, RAM, and the Thunderbolt controller for Thunderbolt for the Thunderbolt ports, all into one package, into one system on a chip.
Which especially Thunderbolt support is different for Apple Silicon, because no iPhone or iPad has supported Thunderbolt. Even USB-C iPad Pros and iPad Airs, it's just USB-C. It's not Thunderbolt. And now we have Apple Silicon that supports Thunderbolt.
I don't think it takes much imagination that the next iPad Pro with an A14X will be some combination of A14 and M1, probably support Thunderbolt on the USB-C.
That would be good for a Pro iPad.
That would differentiate from the iPad Air, which has a USB-C port now, but they could keep that on the slower speed one for a while. And that would mean you could connect the iPad Pro to like the Pro Display XDR and run it at full res and stuff. So
neat.
Yeah. So it really is like an A14X under a different name, but with the compatibility they need to make it run on a
Hmm.
laptop, because it's still the same kind of setup with the big cores and the little cores. The A14 has 2 big cores and 4 small cores, but the M1 has 8 cores total, 4 high performance and 4 efficiency. And Apple had some really weird ways of phrasing how good their chips were in this event. The first of these was they said it's the world's fastest CPU core. That's a direct quote. I don't know exactly what that means, because a
A single
CPU
core
is
of it is.
built up of more than one cores. So
Yeah, and
if you just go,
core isn't like a unit of measure either.
no, you can kind of like divvy up a core however you want. And is it the world's fastest CPU core at a given clock speed? Because I'm sure if you get a M1 core running at 1 gigahertz, it's going to be slower than the best other core you find in the market that runs at 4 gigahertz, right? So
Yeah,
that Apple had some very weird phrasings on all this stuff.
it's aggressive marketing.
Yeah. I mean,
Don't take it to
and to be
heart.
fair, it's aggressive marketing, but also the actual raw performance that they're showing for this is
Mhm.
mostly backing it up. But they still had. I was almost taken aback by how much kind of like Weezer wording they used, when they could have just done like straight spec comparisons and still been really impressive. Do you know what I mean? They almost like
Yeah.
hid behind words for no reason. I kind of felt
I
like.
would say too, like before we get into more specifics, that one big takeaway I had is that, obviously this is the very first chip in the family of chips in this transition that is promised to take only 2 years. And we are in the very first step of that. They met their 2020 goal. This is the first of those things. They've tackled three products. They have many, many more to go. But even in the products that they tackled, they haven't replaced everything in the lineup. So, we'll get to Mac Mini, we'll get to MacBook Pro. Those two things still have Intel versions in the lineup. And I don't think it's because of compatibility, like you just want to have a legacy thing out there. There are things that these new computers can't do that those still can do with IO, and even being higher end, that you know this is still like, it's not a default of you need to buy the M1 version. In some edge cases there will be a need for the Intel version for now because of specific things that the M1 chip can't do yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's where they opened the show by saying the M1 is our first in the family, and it's optimized for our most popular low power systems. Like, and I think the fact that they left they replaced the Air entirely with just the M version, and the
Yeah.
fact that there are variants of the Mac Mini and the Mac Pro stay around, it makes a statement that we know that this M1 chip is designed for the systems that we place today.
Yeah.
In the future, there'll be another chip. Maybe it's called M1X, maybe it's called M2, whatever, that will then fully supplant the other Intel ones in our lineup. And
Mhm.
obviously, we can dig into that when we get there. One interesting fact they did say is that just the small cores on their own, so just the 4 efficiency cores, they apparently have they match the performance of the current MacBook Air. So
Okay.
running at full power usage, the small 4 cores that are only meant to like sit power are on the M1 Max, because they're just the ones you use when you don't have to fret. That's more powerful than the current MacBook Air. So ignore the 4 higher power cores. The efficiency cores on their own already give you the current Intel MacBook Air performance, which is kind of wild. In terms of GPU, it's an 8-core GPU. They called it the world's fast integrated graphics, which again points to the Macs they updated today are the ones that didn't have dedicated graphics cards in them. So the M1 is going to give you better graphics performance than all the Macs that they replaced. Is it going to give you better graphics performance than the 16-inch MacBook Pro with dedicated graphics, or the higher end 13.3-inch Pros? Probably not. It maybe gets close, but it's not going to like destroy them. It's going to trounce the current MacBook Air and the current low-end 13 inches. But there's a reason the other products are still sold today, and that's
Mhm.
because this first chip in Apple's lineup is designed for specific use cases. It's designed to replace the CPU and the GPU in Apple's Macs that don't need dedicated graphics,
Yeah.
basically.
So if you were in the market for those before, any MacBook Air and the first few MacBook Pro 13-inch models, then these are for you. If you were never looking at either of those models, then your time hasn't come yet for an Apple processor. And someone in the chat has mentioned, Gabriel has mentioned that on the iPad spec page, on the iPad Pro spec page, they do call out the M12 motion coprocessor. So,
Okay.
they have numbered it past M8 and 9. They've gone up to 12, but you know, we know that we at least know the difference, and maybe they'll always just say motion coprocessor.
Or maybe
But
when the iPad next gets revved to the 14 version, the reference to any M
that's true.
just gets quietly disappeared.
Yeah.
They obviously spent a little bit of time discussing the unified memory architecture, which obviously they're very proud of,
Mhm.
because that basically means that the RAM is it's in the same package as the rest of the system of chip, which means it has direct access to the GPU and the CPU, and the memory shared among both. So this has trade-offs, because in a dedicated graphics machine, normally you have dedicated video memory. So like you get a graphics card and it has 8 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of RAM that's only used by the graphics card. And then you have your other RAM sticks that are used for the CPU. So in terms of total RAM pool, you have less because it's shared. You don't have a dedicated set just for GPU. But in terms of performance, a unified memory architecture is greatly superior because like people like to think of, oh, the CPU handles like computation and the GPU handles like rendering the pixels. And that is true, but in order to render pixels, you have to do computation. And a lot of the computation involves like generating the texture that the GPU then, does an effect on, like lighting effect, and blitz it across all the pixels on the screen. So in a traditional computer architecture, like current Macs, you have to the CPU has its own memory space that it has to do its manipulations on, and then it has to shuttle off that memory to the GPU memory, which obviously takes time for then the GPU to operate on it and then eventually display it on the screen. By having unified memory, you cut out all of that middlemen steps, because it's just directly the CPU can edit this block of memory and the GPU can immediately access it. You don't have to pull it in a special place, and then you don't have to worry about synchronizing access to the memory, so two things don't read it at the same time and stuff like that. It just reduces and removes a lot of barriers. So that's one way that they're going to achieve, especially on the graphics side, so much better performance for what is, the integrated graphics machine, is through the unified memory architecture. It does mean that you're basically never going to have third-party RAM options. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, that right. And they do offer RAM options in these machines. Right now, is it just 8 and 16? Those are your
Correct.
two options. Yeah. That's with this chip. Maybe in the next entry in this family of chips, we'll have more than that. And is there should we measure RAM differently in this context than we do in other contexts? Because I know in the iPhone world they don't mention RAM, but we do know, this has 6 GB of RAM, and this is how it compares to a Samsung with more RAM, and it still out benchmarks it. So is it possible that 8 is more with an M1 than it
You
would
mean
be?
more effective per gigabyte compared
Correct.
to the
Yeah.
Intel version?
Yeah.
I think it's possible, and there probably will be an improvement, because they did make a big deal of mentioning how they'd optimize the Mac operating system for the M1 chip to make it run super smooth and stuff. But I don't think if you're using 8 gigs of RAM today on your Mac, it's going to drop to half, right?
Right.
You might save 500 megs a gig. Do you know what I mean? You're going to get a small improvement, but you're still going to need a lot of memory, because most of the RAM allocation comes from how the operating system is designed, not so much what the chip architecture is, right? And even on iOS, you feel like you don't ever run out of RAM, but you do. You can see it on an iPhone 11.
You lose tabs, and
Yeah,
you open the
lose
camera.
background apps, right?
You open the camera, and you lose your place in every app.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
The camera uses so much RAM. My iPhone 11 Pro, I basically never noticed my apps going out of the background. I use 5 apps on a rotation. They're always fine. Open the camera, take one picture. Oh, all my apps have to relaunch when I click on them.
Right.
And most people in the world don't even clock that, because it's just natural to, on the iPhone, you close an app and you open another one, and then it, most of the time it opens instantly anyway. Even if it isn't, unfreezing from the background, there's very little loading that ever happens. But on a Mac desktop or a Mac laptop, you're naturally going to have many windows open at once from many different applications. And if it acted like iOS and half of them just disappeared when memory restrictions got tight, it would feel wrong, and it'd feel bad. So even if they could optimize all of the bugs and the weird edge cases in macOS where random processes use insane amounts of memory for no good reason, I just tweeted today, the accounts D process, which I'm pretty sure just manages your iCloud account settings. Before I was recording today, that was using 3 gigs of memory. I'm sure if you look at the iOS operating system and you could actually see the process list there, their accounts D would be way lower, and it would not take 3 gigs of memory on its own because it's just a different operating system at the end of the day that's
Right.
been built
Yeah.
under different constraints. And on the Mac, you've never had the same limits, so development on that platform has been more lax. And so, yeah, of course, they're going to deliver, optimizations and improvements over time. But if you're struggling, I at least, and again, we'll wait and see for hands-on, but my instinct is that if you feel like today you need more than 8 gigs of RAM, you're still going to need more than 8 gigs of RAM when
Yeah.
you buy your M1 machine.
And it's been the case for a long time that you can't upgrade your RAM in a MacBook Air Pro anyway. You could the menu
Right.
for now, but that you decide at the purchase point, and that's it. And that's still the case today, and it's as important now as ever. I'm curious if they'll stock any 16 gigabyte RAM models in Apple stores, because the two pre-configured versions of like the MacBook Air, for example, I think it's, what is it, 256, or what's the base storage, 128 or 256?
I think it's 256.
Okay, and then the next one is 512, and I believe they're both 8 gigabytes of RAM,
Yeah.
and that makes me nervous. I'm like, usually if you add anything, then you got to order it, and it won't be in the store like that. So I'm curious if they have any 16 gigabytes of RAM in store, because that seems to be a pretty good place to put $200 if you're buying this for a while.
And of course, the M1 has the secure enclave, so that replaces all the stuff that the T2 chip used to do. And it has the neural engine, which is, they say, 16 cores, and it's the fastest. They called it the fastest laptop for machine learning work in the world. Well, if you're doing machine learning work, have at it. I don't know if most people day to day will actually notice any benefit from that.
Are these the first Macs with a neural engine included?
Yes.
Because it wasn't a part of like a T system before?
It wasn't part of the T2.
Okay.
No.
And this will have benefits not just in like doing machine learning development, I guess, but also if you're using the Photos app and it has machine
like
learning
if you use Pixelmator Pro and you use the ML resize, then yeah, you're using machine learning operations to do that. But I still think for most consumers today, the use of ML in like the Mac is limited to very specific areas. So like you can hear like it's the fastest computer in the world for machine learning. We're like, true, but you're not doing machine learning operations that often, at least at the moment. Or the operations that you are doing don't actually take that long to do. Like the photo processing is probably the biggest one that any normal person will experience, right? Like doing the face detection and stuff. But that happens in the background when you're connected to battery power gradually over time. Like it's not like you have to sit there and wait for it to finish. Do you know what I mean? So like if it's 20 times faster, you're not gonna see that as much as a day-to-day consumer. It's just
it will be as fast as your iPhone and iPad now, though. And in the past, it was not that. That wasn't the case.
Yeah, obviously they should make it better and they should include it. But if outside of like the smart resizing and machine learning, model-driven stuff, at least today's world, there isn't too much stuff that a general person, like if you're browsing the web in Safari, you can't machine learning optimize any of that. So the neural engine isn't used basically.
Gotcha.
So that's the chip itself. Yeah. Let's take a break, and then we can actually start talking about the individual laptops.
Cool.
Happy Hour this week is brought to you by Clean My Mac X, the all-in-one utility to take care of your Mac's health. It's the perfect tool to prepare your Mac for the Big Sur upgrade. It's a macOS cleaner, a malware remover, performance monitor, and occasionally a computer lifesaver. Clean My Mac X makes it super easy to identify and remove gigabytes of hidden junk files. Scan for unneeded files and easily work out what is using up all your hard drive space using the Space Lens tool. Easily declutter old cache files, logs, mail attachments that you no longer need, and so much more. Clean My Mac detects it all, and you can potentially save gigabytes of space with a single click. It correctly removes unnecessary files and apps, like leftover data for programs that have long since been deleted. Clean My Mac X speeds up your Mac by freeing up RAM, running maintenance jobs, and maximizing performance. The included malware monitor scans your Mac in real time for any possible threats that are infecting your machine. And of course, Clean My Mac X is designed to be super easy to use. It makes it easy to optimize your system and run your Mac at peak performance, just like it did on day one. You can get Clean My Mac X on the Mac App Store and on MacPaw's website. Go to macpaw.com/9to5 to get Clean My Mac X with a 30% discount. That's macpaw.com/9to5. macpaw.com/9to5 for a 30% off your purchase. Thanks to MacPaw and Clean My Mac X for sponsoring happy hour.
Cool. Yeah, if you're going from an old Mac to a new Mac, it's a great time to check out Clean My Mac and not bring over all that old
There's
stuff
so many like
with you.
random like little preference files and stuff that just get left over, and you just
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
get rid of them. And
yeah,
unfortunately, even in 2020, like Mac OS itself doesn't really give you much helpers to actually do it. Like you
yeah.
kind
So
of have to use a
clean your
third
Mac
party
before you
utility.
upgrade your Mac. Yeah.
Yeah.
Big Sur, macOS Big Sur had attention during this 50-minute keynote. Helped reach the goal of 50 minutes. It
If you're
had
watching the video, you can see a frame from this section with Craig Federighi staring longingly and seductively into a MacBook Air.
Yeah, our creative one of our creative editors has enhanced the photo. I had me and a colleague had this idea of like, all the funny things you could do with this meme, basically. And one of our creative editors put shades on Craig, and he's looking into 9 to 5 Max coverage of the event. But the frame can change to be anything. So stand by for months and months of Craig memes.
Craig's good at making memes.
Yeah, the parody account Hair Force One, which is not Craig Federighi, as far as I know, but it's meant to be like the unofficial Craig Federighi account on Twitter and in all the parody world. I think I retweeted that picture, so it's endorsed by the unofficial Craig Federighi Hair Force One account.
It's funny. And
Yes.
and the main like announcement in that section, apart from like a Big Sur feature recap, was that the M1 chip will enable instant on like your iPhone and your iPad. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know how good your memory is, Zach, but way back in 2010, with the original MacBook Air,
Hmm.
not the original MacBook Air, the first rev of the MacBook Air,
Yep.
which is the wedge shape that we know today.
Hmm.
Steve Jobs came on the
In
stage
in the Lion days.
in the Lion days, indeed,
Yeah.
and he said, "We now have instant wake and instant on for our laptops," and it was kind of true. Like before SSDs came to the Mac, it would take forever to turn your
Mhm.
laptop back on.
Yeah,
And you'd be
it
like,
was relative then, and it's become slow now.
yeah, and it was faster in 2010, but they did kind of cheat. Like if you opened the laptop for 3 seconds, it would just show a blank static picture before it would actually catch up and be there with you and whatnot. Like there were lots of cheating. It wasn't as smooth as what you can do on an iPhone and iPad, where you just tap it and it wakes up
Yeah.
instantly, right?
Mhm.
And so that I think is what they're now promising will be true with M1 Max. You'll be
Yeah,
able to
it's
just like
even more instant. It's like
tap the space bar and boom.
you know how there's wireless headphones and then there's true wireless headphones. They should call this true instant wake.
More instant. That's like I don't know what you'd call it, but that's like an oxymoron. More instant.
Yeah, there are fewer instances involved in this instance.
Yeah. So in as well as the instant wake stuff, which we'll have to wait and see with proper hands on to see how instant it is these days. Craig Federighi mentioned that M1 also enables Apple's leading security architecture. So he mentioned features like hardware verified secure boot, high performance encryption, and runtime protections. They just kind of listed them all together as like an M1 benefit. But if you actually do the research, the secure boot stuff and the high performance encryption, that was already served by the T2 before, right? Like those features already exist. You can get full disk encryption on my Mac from 2016 at full speed, and it just happens transparently because it runs through the coprocessor. But obviously now that's all integrated into the M1 chip itself. The runtime protections are new to Mac. They've existed on iOS devices for a few years, but now they're in the architecture of this because they actually depend on the CPU architecture itself because they do like memory pointer validation, all this like clever stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's new with M1, the runtime protection stuff. They also had a few shout outs for the kind of developers that are working on transitioning their current Intel apps to run as universal apps, which will support the ARM architecture natively.
Yeah, we had a story this week where we were looking at ways to see if a developer has opted out to bring their iPhone or iPad apps to the Mac. And of course, Facebook isn't going to bring Facebook or Messenger or Instagram or WhatsApp to the Mac because people would just be way too happy and Facebook would have nothing to complain about when they want to make a policy change in court. But they did have a number of apps that they showed.
Yeah, I mean, what counts as like a native app now is kind of split because you've got like the ARM native Mac app, you've got native iPhone and iPad apps running, and then you've got the old Mac apps that are running through Rosetta.
Well, we were looking this week at a story where Instapaper, the related service, was coming to the Mac for the first time with a native app, and I had to just download it on my Intel Mac to see if it was. Did they mean like Catalyst, or they mean it's the
Yeah,
iPad app on the Mac, or the iPhone app on the Mac, and it was Catalyst, but it takes a little bit of time to research that now.
yeah. They shouted out that Omni Groups, all of Omni Group's app will support the M1 chip natively from, I guess, day one. They said that Adobe Lightroom will also have support from day one, and then Photoshop is coming early next year. So, Adobe's one of the biggest holdouts, right? That everyone's looking towards, being like,
So
maybe
they will
this is gonna.
have Photoshop Classic, Photoshop as like Creative Cloud Photoshop,
Mm-hmm.
and then they will also have Photoshop from the iPad on the Mac.
Is that enabled, or have they opted out of that one? Maybe.
I don't know, but
Yeah, like
if they're talking about bringing, or do
I,
they?
I think I
Oh,
think
they
this.
just mean ARM support. They don't mean.
Yeah, they mean ARM support for
Uh-huh.
Photoshop.
Oh, so there is a class of apps that that won't work on ARM yet.
Well, they work, but they run slowly because of Rosetta.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so they're
Okay. Yeah.
saying
Emulate.
native
Oh,
performance
okay.
Adobe
Okay.
Photoshop.
So we're not talking about having the still immature Photoshop for iPad come to them. Okay, because I misinterpreted that during the event. I was
It
like,
is confusing, yeah.
yeah, it's a lot. It's like a big, family tree of stuff. So
Yeah, yeah. And if you want to break down native Mac app, you've got like AppKit, then you've got the Catalyst garbage. Like it's all a big
but
soup,
before an end user though, all of your apps will work.
right? And in
If
fact,
they're there, they'll work.
yeah, and Rosetta, it seems to be about a 30% performance hit in general, but because the M1's so fast and optimized, Federighi said that some graphically intensive or dependent apps will actually run better under Rosetta than they did on the old Intel
Yeah,
version.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great.
Specifically better than previous integrated graphics Macs, because again, this M1 chip is replacing integrated
Yeah,
graphics
which is
area.
like all MacBook Airs and
Yeah.
yeah.
And they also did a couple of shout outs for the wider experience you get, because now iPhone and iPad apps appear on the Mac just by default unless the developer has opted out.
Right.
They showed the very popular viral game at the moment, which is Among Us, and HBO Max, obviously the streaming service, just to give you an example.
Yeah, the game Among Us, so it's an iPhone and iPad game, right? And then it was ported to the PC, but it wasn't on the Mac. And now the iPad version will run on the Mac, and if you have the ARM Mac, that is.
Right.
Okay, yeah, because my Space Explorer colleagues, they play Among Us, and they have the Discord for the chat. And I haven't jumped in yet, but it would need to be my iPad, not my Mac. And with this, with an ARM Mac, it could be my Mac.
Very confusing, but yes, Among
Yes,
Us, you can play
yes,
it on the Mac now.
yes,
Well,
yeah.
at least on the ARM Mac.
On the ARM Mac, yeah.
Okay, so that's the M1 and the macOS like prologue, I guess.
Yes,
Then they came out with
the
the
first
first
Mac.
MacBook Air
Yes.
featuring the M1 chip. They actually had female presenters for all of the Mac section, for every Mac hardware. This one was Laura Metz. And actually, most of the presenters were, I believe, new to the stage for the first time, so that was cool to see. Laura said that the new MacBook Air with M1 is 3.5 times faster on CPU, 5 times faster graphics, faster than 98% of PC laptops sold within the last year. And that's one of those phrases where it's hard to actually pass how impressive that is, because I guess most PC laptops sold in the last year are just slow anyway. So it's not saying like 98% of PC laptops that were sold at the same price as what the MacBook Air costs. So presumably that includes like netbooks and, Chromebooks and $300 Windows computers, right? Like, so I don't know how to pass those kind of stats when they throw them out, but they love to throw them out. Clearly, this thing is going to be an absolute beast, and it's going to be really fast. Like,
Yes.
you don't need to like decode it. You
This
just
is,
know these things are going to be
if you go way back in history, the MacBook Air didn't always have a solid state drive. You could have a spinning disk drive in a MacBook Air. It's crazy to think about, but you could. And then when you go to solid state drive, it just makes it so much faster. This is kind of that moment for the MacBook Air, but it's not the drive that changes. It's the processor, but it's a great big deal to go from the low end Intel chips with integrated GPUs to what's been the extreme high end of iPad Pro, but even better than that.
Yeah, and we've already seen like benchmarks started leaking out, and the basically all the M1 machines get about like 1700 on Geekbench single core, and that is rivaling. It might not be better than, but it's close to like a 16-inch MacBook Pro performance, basically. And this
Yeah.
is in the MacBook Air,
Yeah.
which now doesn't even have a fan because they made it fanless.
Yeah, I was happy with that because it was the 12-inch MacBook that was fanless, and I really enjoyed that. And our colleague Michael Stieber had one until the wheels fell off of it. Like he was actually on like a work trip to Miami to cover an Apple Store opening, and it stopped functioning. He used it in clamshell mode all the time, and so the battery swole. So the first time we went to like actually open it, it was kind of popping off. Um, but he then his only choice was to buy at that point the MacBook 12-inch had been discontinued, so it was to buy a MacBook Air, and he hated the fan. Like he thought it was disgusting to have that sound come on, and it's like it's not the machine he had before. It wasn't an upgrade. Now the size and weight are so close, and you got a full size keyboard instead of the kind of cramped keyboard. So it's a really cool machine being fanless. I'm glad they did that, and their practical uses, like, we it doesn't have studio quality mic, does it? They don't do that in the
No, it
Air.
doesn't.
Yeah, okay. But that's a case where the mics are great on like the MacBook Pro with the studio quality microphones. If you're on a pinch, but if doing something like a video streaming and you're using your microphone while doing that, it's gonna get hot and the fans are gonna kick in, and then your
Yeah, the
microphones
studio
are
quality mics do a really good job at getting the fans to an
yeah.
accurate sound.
Yeah, so then your fans are like, it's like blowing a big fan into your microphone. In this case, you can do a lot of cool stuff on the MacBook Air. It's just like how an iPad has no fan, with audio recording, and if you're doing it with just audio, not video, then the fans wouldn't be an issue anyway. But in this case, it's kind of cool that you won't have the fans to interfere with what you're doing. I do hope that they're not super hot. I could run my 12-inch MacBook, way past this limit, and it would be like, like a brick in an oven or something. My 16-inch MacBook Pro, the fans are off and on, and it's still super hot. I would love for this to just be it's fanless because they can keep it cool, under load.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, like if you could just close your eyes and wave a magic wand, every computer would be fanless and silent, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's ideal. However, every computer is not like that because heat, power consumption, overheating are real factors, right? And the jury is out on, yes, the MacBook Air is fanless, but what impact does that actually have on usage? Does it have an impact on usage that you actually notice, or is it just like a thing? Because there's a reason why the MacBook Pro that's with M1 that we will talk about soon does still have a fan, right? Like the MacBook Air they've chosen to go fanless, and so will it be slightly less powerful than the equivalent MacBook Pro with the same chip inside it because it doesn't have a fan to keep it cool?
And there is a chip difference too, right? In that it's 7 cores instead of 8 cores. Is that right?
Right. It's very minor, but the lowest end MacBook Air config has a 7-core GPU, but it's still an 8-core CPU.
Can you get an 8-core MacBook Air then?
Yes. If you get the higher config Air, it's 8-core GPU, 8-core CPU.
Cool. Okay.
That I'm pretty sure that's only there because of silicon binning. So
right.
Like that's what they did with the iPad Pro, right? They had the A12X chip and it had a 7-core GPU, and then when they came around to the A12Z and they managed to get TSMC had improved their yields and stuff, they could promise 8 cores across the board. Well, here's the M1 chip, and they're fabricating them. Oh, some of them are slightly defective because one of the GPU cores doesn't work. Doesn't matter. We'll just turn that core off and sell that in the lowest end MacBook Air. So it stops them from wasting production, basically. And realistically, is anyone? I'd love to do like a blind test of a 8-core GPU and a 7-core GPU. Like I think it's gonna be really hard to be able to tell a difference there. Like it's so minor. The difference between A12X and A12Z performance was so minor with that one extra core enabled. Like
I did in my 12-inch MacBook days see, I used that thing for years, see where the system would warn you that the machine was too hot, and eventually you would get to where you'd see like on an iPad where or an iPhone where it's too hot and it's like you can't do anything
Yeah,
until it
if you
cools
do it out in
down.
the sun, you have to like
Yeah,
leave
yeah,
it for a little bit
yeah.
to cool down.
Right, right, right. Like in a car, even. So I'm, that's one of the things that I'm gonna want to see is like, okay, they're fanless again, but do you run into errors? Like you could run Chrome, and basically you could run Chrome alone and have a bunch of tabs, and you could overheat the 12-inch MacBook, in 2015 to
Yeah, how
2017.
strenuous a task do you have to run on the new Air for it to get hot to the
Right.
touch?
Because it's, I've used the old or the last generation Air but for a while, and it never had the issue because of the fan. And so that's going to be the test is did they remove the fan as a party trick, or did they remove the fan because they don't run into performance issues?
If I had to guess, they removed the fan because under average load
Hmm.
that people that buy a MacBook Air use
Yeah.
it for, right? They'll basically be just running on the high efficiency cores by themselves, the power efficient cores, which are plenty fast enough, and they won't need to have a very high heat profile for them. So
Hmm.
I think if you're just like, hopefully, if you're just using Safari and using Twitter, it shouldn't get hot at all, right? It'd only be if you're like they advertised how they were running like multiple 8K streams running through the MacBook Air because the GPU is so much better now, right? I'm sure when you're doing stuff like that, it's gonna get hot. Like Apple can't make CPUs out of magic. They're physical, tangible things. Like they can definitely improve the power efficiency and the performance per watt, and they have done. Like they showed those graphs, and the Intel chip was twice over compared to where the curve
Hmm.
for the M1 chip was. But if you run an M1 chip at full capacity for a long enough period, it's still going to get warm. So
Right.
the question is, how much, how much actual general day-to-day computer activity do you do on an Air, and then where's the crossover for it? Oh, it's starting to get hot now. Like
Hmm.
because even the iPad gets hot if you do
Certainly.
particularly
The phone definitely does too.
yeah if you do like 4K video editing and
Hmm.
cropping and just even just recording 4K video sometimes it does warm up. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
but
But
yeah,
it
I think it's
isn't that
great for them to
the
have a fanless option in the lineup again.
but it isn't that they've handicapped the M1 in a way that it hits a certain ceiling because they want to be fanless, because the M1 is also what they use on the MacBook Pro, which has a fan.
Yeah, and based on the leaked benchmarks, the clock speed seems identical across the Air and the Pro.
Cool. Nice. That's
Yeah.
good to know.
Outside of the chip, they also added 2 times faster SSDs to the Air.
All
Uh,
right. Cool.
that's good, but it's basically catch up to what the Pros have, right? Because
Right. Okay.
the Air's SSDs were always comparatively slower than like the MacBook Pro SSDs. So
Yeah.
now the SSDs are 2 times faster. In the presentation, it was kind of misleading because they were talking so much about the M1 chip, and they were like, and also the SSDs are 2 times faster. And it was like, is that because the storage controller has been improved? No, I think it's just the SSDs are better because when they talk about the Pro later, they didn't mention the SSDs are faster. So they basically just brought the hardware components in line with what the Pros offer.
Hmm.
Uh, and you get a P3 display now, so wide color on the Air for the first time. They did mention the webcam in terms of the image signal processor from the M1 chip will apparently help improve the image quality, but the actual image sensor and the lens is identical to what's in the current Air. So you still got
A
a
potato.
720p webcam in there.
Yeah, and it's not just that it says 720p cam. The 12-inch MacBook had a 480p cam in it. Wow. And there have been better 720p webcams in MacBook products than the one that was in the previous generation MacBook Air, and it's like that one that really makes inferior. I think that I don't know why, it was cost or whatever, but hopefully it's less bad now.
Yeah, yeah. Like I still wish it'd be better, but
Mhm.
okay,
Yeah.
it's what
Yeah,
it is.
especially when like you get really good ones in the phones and the iPads.
Yeah. And I know the lids of the Macs are like a lot thinner than the
They don't,
total size of a phone, but
they don't have to be.
they
It's
don't
a
have to be.
choice.
They could have a camera bump. They could have a slightly bigger lid. Like
They could
if
put
the
it in the
lid was two
keyboard.
millimeters thicker and you had
Oh,
a, like a
I
1080p camera
yeah.
instead, I think people would be happy.
I was listening to Slate Political Gabfest, and John Dickerson is one of the hosts, and he's from CBS News, and he he was talking about his work issued laptop, and he was talking about how thoughtless it was to have the webcam. It was like right down on the bottom of the screen. So he had one of those Dells that has like the webcam on the bottom is at the
Yeah,
top.
like next to the keyboard, basically. Yeah.
Right, right, right. And then how bad that is. It's like, oh yeah, that's still a thing. They deal what they deal with.
Well, remember when they did the 2018 Retina Macbook Air?
Yeah, they
The
took the
webcam's exactly where you expect it to be.
right we expected. They took that stab, and now it's a little bit better.
Something they have changed is the keyboard. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the keyboard. So, in my Mac usage over the decade, the keyboard has changed a few times. If you recall, there used to be a widget system on the Mac that was called Dashboard, and that's where widgets went.
Mm-hmm.
There was a key for it. It was like a speedometer with different icons for widgets on it. That was a dedicated key. They eventually added, like, you know, there was also Expose, which was a way to look at a grid of windows in like a 4x4 arrangement before
Mission control.
mission control. And then that was like, leopard and snow leopard days for me. Then Lion came out, and Lion introduced mission control, which was, rethinking of the way that expose worked. Instead of a grid of windows, it was it was like there's also this show all active windows. There's still a gesture on the trackpad that you can do, but that was part of expose. It was like all of your windows or all of your apps, and mission control kind of combined those two things. And also Lion learned how to do full screen kind of Windows style, but better. It was the lessons learned from full screen apps on the iPad was kind of the idea, and that was mission control. So they changed the function key. I think it's F3 that goes to mission control. It used to be expose and mission control. They also replaced dashboard, the widgets launcher, with Launchpad, the app grid. Again, borrowed from the iPad, never really enhanced for Mac OS, but Launchpad was the icon there.
They
Um,
tried to make it a thing. It never really became a thing.
yeah, I like it because it has a rocket as the icon, and it's always been neat. And I actually
It
do
doesn't have
like.
a rocket anymore in Big Sur, right?
It did in the event. It doesn't in real life
I
yet.
think the one they showed in the event is the old icon. So I think the GM ships with
All the
the
press images show the just generic colored squares.
yeah, that's what's shipping.
That's too bad. So and then I guess there's another set of icons which is on the keyboard. On backlit keyboards, not the Magic Keyboard for desktops, unfortunately, but on notebooks they have keyboard brightness, which is separate from screen, display brightness. They have that as well. But keyboard brightness is how bright is the backlit keyboard. For me, it's been the way to turn it off if you never needed to do that for some reason. There were also levels of brightness that made like no impact at all. So those keys weren't used very much. Now the keys are they've replaced that set with keys for dictation, which is neat because dictation was introduced around like Mountain Lion or so as
Yep.
a fast input method for voice to text, and the trigger by default has been to double click the FN key, so the function key. So it's not one thing, and it's a really good feature. They've even improved it over time, but it's never been a button. In the touch bar era, you could add it to your control strip, so you have the microphone icon. You have that you have that icon on an iPhone 10 and later, like huge. It's been one of the keys on the iPhone for forever, but it's like a really big deal on those. Now it's one of your hardware keys on the MacBook Air. You don't have it on the Pro because that's touch bar, right?
Right. Yep.
You can customize the control strip, but that's it. There's also do not disturb. So the crescent moon is now a hardware key. Uh, that's neat. You can quickly toggle do not disturb on and off. In Big Sur, they changed do not disturb a little bit, where like it functions the same way, but you can pull it out of the new control center and put it in your menu bar. So it used to be tucked under notification center when you pull down, and it was a toggle there. Now it can be a menu bar click. And I've noticed that if you don't use do not disturb, you just let it be in control center and you manage it there, that even when you wake from sleep, you see it in your menu bar because it's there when it's active, even if you don't pin it there. So you see it for a few seconds and then it deactivates and goes away.
Mm,
That's Intel. I imagine now on an M1 chip you don't see that.
you'd
But
hope so.
yeah, but it's on the keyboard now. And the other is Spotlight Search, which you've seen that on like the iPad keyboard before.
It's kind
Now
of
it's
crazy that Spotlight hasn't made it the keyboard for because Spotlight's been around for donkey's years.
Yeah, and it's really good. And they didn't
Yeah.
do like a Siri button. They did change the I think the FN button now has like the language picker, which if you only use one language, the second language that it switches to is emoji.
Right. Yeah.
So you now have the globe icon on the function key on the MacBook Air, and I assume the MacBook Pro in that case too, because that wouldn't be replaced by Touch Bar. But now you've got the butt, and that's cool because we all know that people use emoji, and the shortcut for that before I think it's like Command Shift K, which
Yeah. It's something
it
obscure.
yeah, it's you have to look it up to find it, or click somewhere in the GUI. But Command Shift K is now replaced with like one click of FN, which is a good because FN doesn't do anything on its own. It's a combination button. It's a modifier key. So
And you
I
don't have
think
to
that
double click it anymore because you've got a dedicated dictation button.
that's right. So I think that all these improvements are neat and charming,
Yeah,
and
it's a good upgrade to
yeah.
the like the keyboard and just a nice little update to bring in time. Zach, do you know how you can use the keyboard less?
Use the keyword less dictation. I don't know.
You can actually take your time back with the power of Text Expander.
All right, I use
Repetitive
that a lot.
typing, little mistakes, searching for answers, they're all taking time away from you and your team. With Text Expander, you can take your time back, turn the things you type into reusable snippets that can be used time and time again. Save time typing and be consistent while you're at it. Text Expander makes it easy to give your team the right words for every situation. Get it right every time. Whether you need to keep legal happy or delight customers with effective answers, you can rest easy in the knowledge that your team has got it covered. The latest version of Text Expander has new and improved statistics reporting for organizations, including the ability to build reports with customizable date ranges for enterprise and individuals, so you can track how much time your team is actually saving using Text Expander. With Text Expander, keep your team accurate and current with all the changes and latest messaging for your business and brand. Share your text and images with your entire staff to keep them on track. Use Text Expander's powerful shortcuts and abbreviations to streamline and speed up everything you type. Create a powerful snippet once. Then you can use the assigned abbreviation to let Text Expander do the rest of the job for you. No more repetitive typing, no chance for human error. It means everyone in your company will be sharing the same messaging and giving the same answers to customer questions. Text Expander works everywhere you type: Slack, Google Docs, Trello, email, web browsers, the lot. And you can get Text Expander on Mac, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad. Unlock your productivity with Text Expander. Listeners to this show can get 20% off their first year subscription. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more and sign up. That's textexpander.com/podcast.
Yeah, when I was updating from macOS Big Sur release candidate 1 to 2, my Mac, everything got like wiped out and it went badly. One of the first things I had to install to be like back up and running, there's like Slack for work and everything. Text Expander was one of those things because I cannot function without it. There's so many shortcuts that like long text snippets that I use. It's essential for my Mac. Tyler in the chat mentions that the Spotlight key is kind of a waste because you can always do Command Space to activate Spotlight, and that's kind of one of those like the first keyboard shortcut kind of power user things that you learn as a Mac user.
That is true.
You also use Command Space and hold to activate Siri. So I wonder if on the MacBook Air with the Spotlight key, if Command Space optionally can just be like Siri.
Maybe it maps default to Siri, and then you can change it back to Spotlight if you want.
Yeah, that would be neat. It would be a missed opportunity if not, because I think Tyler's right that Command Space is like the Mac user's way to get to Spotlight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree with what they changed with the keyboard, though, because keyboard brightness buttons are never used.
No.
Putting dictation and
if it was display brightness, that would be a shame, but it's not as keyboard brightness. So that's
exactly.
Yeah. Mac Mini.
Oh, sorry, we should just say the MacBook Air has the same $999 price and $899 for education. That's starting price, obviously. But They didn't make it more expensive. They didn't make it cheaper. Same price.
Same price. Okay.
Mac Mini?
Yeah.
This is a surprise.
Yeah. We were coming into this thinking, just based on reporting and the rumors that there would be the MacBook Air, 13-inch MacBook Pro, and then maybe the 16-inch MacBook Pro. And it said there's no 16-inch, which was kind of before the event, everyone was kind of dubious on that. And then Mac Mini shows up in the middle of the event. It's like, Okay.
I think their phrasing was like, and now we're going to bring the M1 chip to another of our most beloved Macs. And I was like ready to post the 13-inch MacBook Pro story. And they were like, it's a Mac Mini. I was like, what? Okay. So yeah, just like the MacBook Air, the Mac Mini looks the same, except now it's silver instead of space gray.
Silver again instead of space gray.
Yeah. And as we were talking about before, they still sell space gray Mac Minis on the website because you are losing some stuff, right? Or you're not getting you're getting some things, and it's a trade off. So far they haven't been able to supplant the entire Mac Mini lineup. The Airs are all gone. You can only buy
the
M1
previous
Airs now.
Yeah, the previous Mac Mini went super high end. Well, medium high end, where the old Mac Minis were they had low end lives. This is back. This went down in price for what it costs to start out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's as cheap as the Mac Mini's ever been, but it's
no,
around.
The Mac Mini started at $499.
Yeah.
Originally.
So it's been very cheap before. But again, this isn't like a low performance Mac Mini either.
This is kind of like a replacement for before they
The 2012, 2014.
Yeah, before they did the previous like Pro quote unquote Mac Mini update. If the Mac Minis that exist before were like in line with that, this would be like replacing them basically. Yeah. Obviously, it's the M1 chip, so it's super fast. You've got 3 times faster CPU, 6 times faster GPU. The industrial design is the same. It still has the fan. The port situation is different. So previously, the Mac Mini would have 4 USB-C ports on the back, 4 Thunderbolt ports on the back. Now it only gets 2, but those USB-C ports are USB 4 ports, so they're slightly more forward-looking. You still get 2 USB-A ports.
What's USB 4?
The future.
Is that so? Hang on. We have USB 3.1.
Yeah.
There's 4 USB.
There is
USB 4.0.
4 is coming.
4 is coming.
It's kind of like just about starting.
Is this the first Mac with a USB 4 port?
Correct.
The Mac Mini is?
Well, the Air's USB 4 as well now. All the M1s are USB 4 ports.
Okay. Is that the first Mac with?
Yeah.
Are these the first Macs with USB 4?
These are the first Macs with USB 4, yeah.
Okay. What is USB 4?
More like Thunderbolt 3, but in USB standard.
Okay.
It is far. Like there are improvements, but it's not like a step change leap.
I'm just now learning about USB 4. That's
yeah,
cool.
it's confusing, but it's like basically before you had USB-C, and like USB-C is just the port shape, right? You had USB 3.2, which was X speed. Then you had Thunderbolt 3, which was 4 times faster than USB 3.2. USB 4 is basically combining Thunderbolt 3 with some USB advantages into one port with one standard, basically.
Yeah. And we didn't mention, but the well, maybe we did. How many ports are in the MacBook Air that we just talked about?
2.
2 ports. Are they on the same side or different sides?
They're on the same side, I think.
Yeah, me too. Which is not optimal because charging on either side is so good, especially when you don't have that big, long, thick lead that comes in the box now.
Yeah, it's the exact same design as the current Air. So it's 2 ports, and then on the other side you have a headphone jack, but no USB.
Yeah, that's weird. And how many displays can the MacBook Air connect to?
It depends what resolution.
Resolution, okay. 4K displays.
I think
1.
2.
Or I think 1. We'll check
really?
it out. Yeah, I think it's 1.
Some of this stuff where they haven't like fully detailed.
I think because I think the Mac Mini can do 2. One with Thunderbolt and one with HDMI, and that's their trick for getting the second one is that it has HDMI. Yeah, and if you know me, I've got 2 4K displays connected to a MacBook Pro on either side, and I couldn't do that with a MacBook Air. I could do it with a Mac Mini, but I'd need a new cable for the HDMI part. Yeah.
So all of the M1 Macs through the USB 4 ports can only drive one display.
Yeah.
Even though that one display can now be 6K, because they made a big deal about that. Like you can run it. You can drive the Pro Display XDR at full resolution. Yeah.
You're just not going to get that second display, which is, I think, a second display on a notebook is. I mean, a second external display on a notebook is pretty common. It's not the most common, but it's
that's my fault, because when they said that they can drive Pro Display XDR at 6K, I was thinking, well, obviously then they've got the bandwidth to drive 2 at 4K. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
but clearly not.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll look more into how the resolution breakdown goes.
There are
But
definitely some weird like gotchas that you have to be aware of, I think.
mhm, mhm.
The Ethernet port now, you don't get the option for 10 gigabit Ethernet, which it wasn't standard on the old Mac Minis, but you could
And
get it as a
it
$100
was
upgrade.
yeah, and that was introduced with the iMac Pro, so that was still pretty high end. And I don't know if I don't recall if it came to the iMac in this last revision or so, but 10 gigabit Ethernet was still pretty high end.
Yeah,
Whereas gigabit Ethernet is good and probably okay for a lot of people
I can't imagine many people use bought the 10 gigabit Ethernet option.
as the add-on. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you got to really know that you need it. So,
Uh, it starts at $699, like we said. That's
uh-huh.
$100 cheaper, and it can go up to 60 gigs of RAM, 2 terabytes of storage. It's fine. Like I think it was a nice surprise.
Yeah,
If you were in the market for the old Mac Mini, then you might be slightly let down because you don't have the full I/O support anymore. You can't get like a 4 terabyte storage in it anymore. You
hmm
have to, if you want that, you have to go and get one of the old space gray ones that they still sell. But in terms of the
yeah,
M1, like the Air, the current limitations of the M1 chip, you don't really feel them in the Air. But the Mac
correct.
Mini, because Apple tried to make it more pro in the last revision,
Yeah.
it's now more noticeable.
It's harder to replace it so far because they did make one that was more in line with like what you see in a 16-inch MacBook or any of the iMacs. So that will take some time. Like maybe we'll see when they make the iMac with an M chip that there'll be a Mac Mini that Mac Mini at the high end, the
Right,
Space Gray Intel
they bring
model.
back a space gray ARM-based Mac Mini.
Yeah, yeah, that could be the case. So. In the chat, folks are saying that it's just one display at any resolution on that MacBook Air, and then it's of course with the Mac Mini, it's a second external display, but
But it has to be
it's
through HDMI for the other one.
right,
Yeah,
yeah. So that's interesting to me. Kind
yeah,
of
I didn't realize that. I hadn't
you
seen
know
that.
they're not going to like highlight that in Keynote, and now in the M1 chip, you can connect one external display instead of multiple.
So yeah, that obviously leads us into the 13-inch MacBook Pro,
Uh-huh.
which I know it's a surprise. 2.8 times faster CPU, 5 times faster GPU. Where have you heard that before? And this one does have a fan, and they specifically call out that the fan offers sustained performance. So that's maybe where we're going to see the differences with the Air in terms of the performance profile, right? Like Geekbench's scores are identical across the board, but Geekbench scores aren't really sustained performance tests. They're like
Right.
momentary performance test,
Yeah.
right? Like
There should be one for sustained performance.
if you're doing like a handbrake code where you're encoding a video for an hour, the Air's probably going to chug and the Pro won't because it can be cooled by the fan. Like that's where the difference is going to be. That's what you interpret by reading between the lines of what Apple said on the stage, at least.
Yeah.
The biggest like thing they promoted with MacBook Pro is that it's the longest battery life ever.
Yeah, and would you talk about battery life for MacBook Air?
Not
Because
really. We kind of passed over it. But
yeah, I mean they promised 12 now, and I don't know if people achieve that. Even when they promise like 9, I usually get about 4 or 5. That was the case in the 12-inch MacBook. Like I would get at most 4 hours, maybe 5, but it was rare. In the Retina 12-inch MacBook, they promised like at most 18.
yeah, I've got the stats actually. So
Okay.
MacBook Air, the new MacBook Air, 15 hours of wireless web browsing, 18 hours of video playback, which is 6 hours more than the previous generation.
Yeah, in our discussions, we were like, even if you get half that, that's really impressive.
Yeah, like if you get 9 hours of actual usage, so good.
You can get through a full 8-hour shift, you know.
And the MacBook Pro, obviously, because it's bigger, right? The chassis is
Mhm.
bigger. They can put a bigger battery in there,
Wedge shape, yeah.
not wedge shape. That gets the best out of the lot. That gets 17 hours of wireless web browsing and up to 20 hours of video playback. Like,
Yeah.
if you can get 10 hours, like, you know, blogging, right?
Mhm.
Which for us basically means having TweetDeck open, having Mail open, having Slack open, having a load of Safari tabs open.
Mhm.
That's basically what blogging is these days, right?
That's right.
If you can get 10 hours of web browsing out of that, incredible. And they're quoting 20 hours of video playback. So if you cut it in half for, not just
Yeah.
playing video, I feel like that's a pretty good estimate. And if you can get 10 straight hours of actual usage out of a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro,
Yeah. Now I should highlight that this MacBook Pro can only drive one external display. You know,
That's funny. That is
it's such a weird trade-off. Like, yeah.
that must be like the M1 display controller doesn't have like more lanes or whatever. Like because it's everything's on one chip, they don't have the space to, at the moment at least, to have two lanes of
Like
separate video
they
streams.
they cannot replace the 16-inch MacBook Pro and only be able to do one display.
No, but this is why it's the first in the family, isn't
Right,
it?
right, right, right. And it is a step down for these machines compared to what they were before. But surely they address that in the next. And it would be wonderful if through a software update they could address this in these machines. I wouldn't
I
count
highly
on
doubt
it.
it's a software
Yeah,
thing. It's probably done through hardware.
yeah. But surely the M1X or whatever they end up calling it can do more than one external display.
Yeah, well, I actually have a slightly mini tangent on that in a minute, so
Okay.
we'll get to that.
Okay.
Just in terms of the 13-inch, just finish off the spec sheet.
Sure.
They're adding a studio quality 3 mic array, which is similar to what they have in the 16-inch Pro, right?
Okay.
But it wasn't in the low end 13 inches before. So this is like the replacement for the 2-port 13-inch MacBook Pro, right? The 4-port 13-inch MacBook Pro, which despite being called a MacBook Pro, like the 2-port one wasn't really a MacBook Pro, right? It was like a high-end Air that wasn't stretched for space, right? Like because it didn't have
Yes.
to use the wedge. The higher end 4-port MacBook Pro continues to be sold. Again, it's showing them the M1 chip is for the low end consumer machines, right? The
Mhm.
quote unquote professional machines are yet to be updated, and we're waiting to see what happens there.
Right.
But now they've got the 3 mic array studio quality thing in the low end.
Apple should have done. You know how they told us that we'd see the first ones by the end of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't affect Mac sales. I mean, the pandemic made Mac sales go through the roof because people
Yeah,
had
Mac sales are doing better than ever.
yeah, they had a record quarter because people had to buy their own machines instead of go to work with their machines. Um, and they should have said, and we're going to have the next update in the next 9 months or 6 months or whatever, because it kind of like satisfied everybody.
Yeah, because Bloomberg going in kind of hinted that the 16-inch might be shown, right? And we
Yeah,
didn't see
so
a
it must be
16-inch.
near. Yeah.
So maybe in the springtime is
Mhm.
when they start rolling that out. 13-inch MacBook Pro, the price doesn't change. It's still $12.99, same starting price. Let's do the final ad, and then we can kind of do a summary of these machines and their kind of like commonalities.
Sure.
Do you need help with marketing for your small business or company, but are unsure if you want to get an outside agency on board? Just don't bother. Get top-level talent for the work that you need done. Start talking to top-level growth markets today with Right Side Up. Right Side Up represents a group of premium vetted growth marketing talents ready for you to hire. Right Side Up works directly with companies to hand-select marketers that will suit your team. And they are very flexible, whether you need one person or five for 5 hours a week or 50 hours a week. Marketers specialize in areas like paid search, social media advertising, and more. They've created industry-leading practices for Amazon, affiliate marketing, and podcast advertising. Right Side Up are trusted by hundreds of early-stage businesses, all the way up to companies like DoorDash, Zenefits, and Yelp. They all just want to do growth marketing better. So if you need to launch a new campaign, or you're just looking to grow your existing marketing team, you need Right Side Up. And right now, Right Side Up is offering our listeners a free week of service after your first quarter of engagement when you go to rightsideup.com/happy hour. That's rightsideup.com/happy hour to speak to one of their marketing strategists and finally get the customer acquisition and marketing help that you need. One more time, go to rightsideup.com/happy hour today and get a free week of service after your first quarter of engagement.
Yeah, I spent some time on the phone with some folks from Right Side Up, and they're a really energetic team. So check them out. It's sounds like a really good service there. Casualties of the M1 transition. Well,
Like,
multiple display support.
multiple displays is a new one to me.
Okay, yeah,
I think the big trend, less USB-C ports, right? Because the Mac Mini had 4, now
Sure.
it has 2.
yeah.
The 13-inch MacBook Pro, they couldn't update the 4-port one. They could only update the 2-port one.
Uh-huh.
It maxes out now at 2 terabytes of storage. You can't get a 4 terabyte storage option,
Okay.
unfortunately. And the one that actually I think matters the most is that all of the M1 Macs today have a maximum of 16 gigabytes of RAM.
Yeah, and do you think that's technical, or do you think they don't think there's a market for higher? Surely they would, if they could do it on a technical level, they would let you pay more to give Apple more money, and their
Right.
margins
I
would be wonderful.
100% think it's a technical
Okay.
limitation of the M1 chip, right?
Hmm.
They starting this transition, they say it as plainly as they did at the very start of the event. The M1 is for our low power, most popular machines that have integrated graphics, right?
Hmm.
And so when they started designing this chip 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whenever, that was the motif, that was the mission objective. Obviously, they're going to have an M1X and an M2 and stuff in development that will undoubtedly address most of these limitations, but you can see where they came from. Like USB-C lanes, obviously now it's all in one controller inside the CPU. So the fact that they can only have two Thunderbolt controllers for two ports, there you go, right? In a future chip, they'll have a bigger package, a bigger die that will be able to have more room to have more Thunderbolt controllers on it, right? Similarly, storage. They when you get to like the 4 terabyte storage sizes, you need more complicated SSD controllers that are probably bigger, and they couldn't fit them inside the package of the M1 today. And then the same thing with the RAM. The RAM isn't like it's not as easy as it is on a current Mac to just put like more RAM sticks on the motherboard, right? Like it's in the package, and if you look at the size of the package, it's full. And what can they fit there? They can fit two bays of RAM. Well, they're not actual bays, you know what I mean, but it's easier to say it that way. And so you can have an 8 GB one, or you can have a 16 GB one, and there just isn't the space to have more on the M1 chip. That's the casualty of the transition, and that's why today they've updated the MacBook Air, they've updated the Mac Mini, but made it silver to denote that it's not the Pro version that's space gray, and they've updated the 2-port MacBook Pros. In time, maybe as soon as March or February, or maybe even January, who knows, they're obviously going to make like an M1X that is bigger. Maybe it has 12 cores of CPU and GPU, and maybe it can support 4 USB-C ports and go up to 32 gigs of RAM or 64 gigs of RAM, right? Like, in the wake of the event, I saw quite a lot of criticism of the fact that these machines max out at 16 gigs of RAM. And for me, I get it, right? Like, I think 16 gigs of RAM is not enough for a lot of people that want to do pro workflows on them. But these are the consumer machines. That's what they've optimized for. That's what they made. It's not going to be like a permanent issue with the ARM Max, right? It's just this first one they did. This chip was designed with certain constraints in mind, and certain technical, they started simpler, right? And they were obviously working on a more complicated version. I don't think you can be disappointed with what we saw this week. They're offering you 3 times the performance, CPU and GPU performance at least, right, on every model, and you're getting, let's say, twice the battery life. Like, that alone is fantastic.
I've never had a Mac. I've never had a Mac with more than 16 gigabytes of RAM that wasn't like a Mac Mini with a bunch of third-party RAM inside of it, and I've never needed more than. Well, I guess I had a Mac Pro. That was what, 32.
Yeah,
but I didn't need it, and my MacBook Pro 16-inch has 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it's fine for me. So these machines, I would not spend the money on the 8 gigabytes of RAM. I think that's scary to think about as an investment, but I would certainly spend $200 more for the 16 gigabytes of RAM and be content with it.
Yeah, I'm sitting on a 2016 MacBook Pro, right, and it has 16 gigs of RAM, and I definitely feel it. I don't want to buy another laptop.
It affects your voice, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It gives me hiccups of just thinking about it.
You get emotional, yeah.
But if you're just doing web browsing, Office, Google Docs, Mail, which is like, a big percentage of what MacBook Air buyers are buying it for, like students, right? That kind of workflow. You're going to be fine on 16 gigs of RAM. You'll probably be all right on 8 as well.
Yeah.
If you're trying to do like Xcode development, all that stuff, of course you're going to need more. And that's
they haven't addressed that market yet.
And
chips.
They did show like, Xcode's 3 times faster on the Air, and I'm sure it is, but it's clearly not what these machines are like aimed at, right? They're aimed at the consumer end of the market,
right? Yeah, it's not the best for that.
Yeah,
yeah.
Like, is it annoying that they couldn't go the whole leap on the first go round and give you like a 32 gigabyte RAM option and a 4 terabyte SSD in like the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and they couldn't get 4 ports on there? obviously, yes, it is frustrating because
Mhm.
we want these chips are clearly so good. We want them to be able to fit our letterbox of needs right this second and go ahead with it.
Yeah.
Similarly, is it slightly disappointing that all these machines basically look identical and they haven't added like Face ID or touch screens or anything else, right? Yeah,
Keyboard change is
obviously it
nice.
is. But can
Yeah.
you really be? Can you complain about it? I don't think so. They gave to us the biggest performance improvements year over year or model
Right.
over model they've
If I
probably ever done.
yeah, if I was
Same with
given the
battery life improvements. Like what
yeah,
can like you can't be annoyed about that. Like it's a great update.
if I was given the option of a slightly redesigned MacBook Pro or Air or even Mac Mini with Intel or one of these
Yeah.
and the MacBook Air design isn't even that old because it got updated so late in the cycle that it's still modern. That I would much prefer the ARM chip inside than the Intel chip. I'd prioritize the processor and the capabilities over the design. And
Yeah.
and I'm someone who loves the iPhone to change the look, as often as possible, for the sake of change. So in this case, and also I recall like when I bought my 2016 MacBook Pro, which you still, one that you still use,
Mm-hmm.
um, the,
Begrudgingly, but yeah, I
yeah,
still use it.
yeah. The max storage then was 1 TB, I believe, and
Sounds
they
right.
added 2 TB over the years, and it's still expensive, so I haven't bought it yet. But in this machine, so 2 TB to me, in the Mac Mini, it's where that can be like a server or your media server or whatever. You can also plug in storage externally and have it always be attached in a way that's not as inconvenient as that on a laptop. But to me, like 2 TB is still expensive, but cool to be an option. Like if you really want to exploit on the machine, 2 TB, that's about as high as I'd go.
Yeah,
um,
how many people buying Airs are buying the 2 TB one? Probably not very many people.
right.
Like
Yeah. Like,
like
I have to think about it for myself. Yeah.
like at a highest level, the machines that these Macs are designed to replace, they have wholeheartedly replaced without issue, right? Like the Air that you buy with an M1 chip is far and away better than the Air you could buy last week, right? And with almost no downside. Like it's not like all your apps don't work; they're going to run under Rosetta.
You
It,
get more
it basically
apps.
seems like at worst you're going to get performance like you got before, but
Yeah.
in most cases you're going to get 3 times the performance, 5 times the performance, and you've got no fan on the Air, which is great.
Mhm.
Similarly with the low end pros, right? The 2-port 13-inch MacBook Pro, now it's better than ever, right? If you are in the market for if your current laptop today is a MacBook Pro with 4 ports on it, then yeah, you're currently not served probably by what they're offering with the M1 line. Similarly, if you have a 16-inch MacBook Pro or a 15-inch MacBook Pro, probably not, right? Like you can be very tempted, and in many ways, these machines are going to be better than the ones you've got now, but they're not going to be able to accommodate everything. Like they're going to not have enough RAM, or they're not going to have enough ports, or the screens just aren't big enough in the case of like 16-inch users, right? But that will come. It's not like here's the M1 line, here's the Intel line. They're not going to carry on both. Within 2 years, they're going to have chips that can support multiple display outputs, 32 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of RAM. They're at some point going to have to do a Mac Pro chip as well that can do even more like expandability. Like, I'm thrilled. Like, they promised a lot, and I feel like they delivered.
I agree. I mean, the battery life is like the biggest treat to me, and
Yeah.
that's something that we hoped for. We just didn't know how high it would go.
They could
And
have come out and just said, like, these machines get the same performance as the old Air, for instance, and it gets twice the battery life, and I'd have taken it, right? I'd have
yeah,
gone, great. That's enough reason alone to do an ARM transition. The
yeah,
fact that they can offer double the battery life and double the performance, let's say, you know, fantastic. And you're not gonna see that again, right? Like next year when they do the next revision to the Air, you're not going to have another doubling of performance and doubling of battery life. This is a step change that comes from switching from x86 to ARM, right?
Mhm.
Hopefully they can continue giving 10% year-over-year performance increases, 20% year-over-year performance increases, like what they've delivered on the iPhone and iPad pretty consistently for 4 or 5 years now. But you're not going to see 100% faster, 100% longer battery life. Like that's a once in a generation thing. They literally call this a new generation of Mac,
Mhm.
and that is the juncture. That's the step change.
That's right.
So with
Yep.
that in mind,
Hmm.
and the fact that we just said if you currently have a 16-inch MacBook Pro, you probably don't want. Well, you might not want one of these machines. You have a 16-inch MacBook Pro,
Yes.
and I am aware that you have ordered stuff. So, what are you buying?
Okay, right. It's gonna shock you right now. I've got a clean slate. I have nothing coming.
Oh,
Yeah, I impulse ordered a Mac Mini, and then I was looked at the trade and just the base model, because it was like that. I wrote the story in M1, and I was like, man, this is amazing. And I've got two displays and a trackpad and a keyboard, and it would be my always on machine. Plug in the eGPU, and it's got a beefy GPU in it, and you can't do eGPU. You just can't do that with an M1 chip. That's one of the things that we give up, I believe. Um, Two displays. I'd have to get an adapter from it's just these are LG 4K displays. They're just USB-C, so I could do that with an adapter. But it's kind of experimental. So it wouldn't be quite as simple as plug and play. So I canceled the order, and I was like, I'll sleep on this one, and I'll go into a store and make a purchase probably, but I'm less keen now on that device. Um, then I thought, then I thought about, well, for a moment I was going to do a Mac Mini and a MacBook Air, which was my setup from like 2013 to 2015. That combination, and it was cool to have an always-on Mac at home. Downloading photos offline, and then the MacBook Air being like the portable thing that I use the most. Um, it was kind of sentimental in that regard. It's like what I started out with, but this is the new version of that. Um, then I thought about, well, if I get a MacBook Air, I really want to get a beefy one, like, because this MacBook Air is like no wimp now. So 16 gigabytes of RAM is necessary, at least 1 terabyte of storage because that's what I'm used to. But I regretted on the 16-inch not getting 2 terabytes because it changes the way that I can use the computer, and way less reliance on external storage.
yeah, because you have a massive photo library that you'd ideally like to keep all local, right?
I do, and I import a lot of video too from like action cameras and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
from motorcycle rides and stuff like that. So yeah, and drone flying, and like there's a huge library of video before I narrow it down to what I save, do an edit. But so a larger storage is ideal. So I think it becomes around. I think it doubles in price when you double the.
Spec it out.
Yeah, you need to check out. I think it goes from 1,000 to 2,000, which it's still good value for what it is. It's a Retina MacBook Air with no fan. I'm a little bit torn now on performance. Because there are some tasks in like audio editing where I'm relying on the machine. I'm not relying on it. I'm benefiting from the machine kicking in the fans, having sustained performance for five
Yeah.
minutes, and then it's done. But honestly, these days I'm offloading a lot more of that stuff now, where it's less on my machine and more on someone else's machine anyway. So I think MacBook Air is the way I would go, and I'd spec it out. But the one display thing is like, oh, that stinks, because I mean it's technically two displays if you've got your MacBook Air display and an external display,
Yeah.
but they're different sizes, and I love having both
Equal.
21.5-inch 4K displays side by side. Slack and TweetDeck over here, and then the windows that I'm working in that aren't like view only for the most part on another display. I mean, even right now, I'm benefiting from that. And so then that would be the MacBook. That would be the Mac Mini again, and it's $700, so it's not nothing. And I do want an ARM Mac. So the answer probably is like the correct thing to do would be to do nothing until M1X comes out, and that's not off the table. I know myself though, so like impulsively, I'll probably look at getting the spec'd out MacBook Air and doing that, and then adjusting my work, how adjusting to fit in that smaller box.
Just turn one of your 21.5-inch monitors off for a week, and then you'll be used to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have like I've even like made my lifestyle investment like where I've got a VESA arm mount for the displays, and it's dual, so they're not using stands. It's what would solve the problem is one 32-inch 6K nano texture. One $7,000 display would make this $2,000 purchase better, because then it's like having two displays side by side in one. But no, so right now I've got I ordered nothing,
I am
and
proud of you, Zach. No impulse. No impulse.
yeah, I mean because it's what we just talked about, that they're addressing the popular low power market, and that there
And
are
you are right
down.
now a 16-inch MacBook Pro customer, right?
Yeah.
So it
Yes.
makes perfect sense that there isn't something that quite fits the bill for you at the moment.
That's right. That's right. So it's gonna be the reality is that I'll probably do nothing until the next round of updates come out. There's
What
a
if they bring out a redesigned ARM iMac in January? That'll throw a spanner in the works.
Yeah, it will, but I have to have a notebook. Like it's essential.
Yeah.
So,
But you could carry on with your current one
correct. Yeah, I
and just
could.
have the iMac at home.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance that I do, and I look at trading value too on just from Apple, like for my 16-inch MacBook Pro from last year, it's $1,400, which is, a fraction of what it is worth in cost, but that's not nothing. Like that covers most of, that covers like almost 75% of the MacBook Air spec'd out. It's just coming to terms with the display situation. Um,
Yeah.
you know.
As for me, I think you can probably tell I'm not buying anything at the moment.
Right, because
But
you are a high-end user.
a high-end user with a 15-inch MacBook Pro. But I can tell you, as soon as there's a 16-inch MacBook Pro that's running on an M chip, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
Like,
You know what would be great is in this era of 9 to 5 Mac when we do get review units for the sake of actually like writing about them and experiencing them as testers, but not for the sake of like owning them and purchasing them, and keeping them forever. You send them back when you're done. I would love to like test one of these things and have
yeah.
experience with it and not replace a machine with it because it doesn't replace mine yet.
If
And
I
so
was going to
maybe,
buy anything, I'd get a Mac Mini and
okay.
find a use for it, right? Like I could
Yeah.
put like the family photos on it and stuff, but that's
And
just
we
kind of making up a use for it just to have one, right?
that was where my head was at first when I was thinking Mac Mini too. Was like, right now I don't offload photos to, if the machine breaks, they're downloaded to it. But I don't have I trust my system, so it's okay.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
I would love, like, I think I'm really hyped. Like,
So I'm buying
how
two
good the
HomePods.
M1 is,
Yeah.
it just hypes me up for the M1X MacBook Pro that I can buy, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's what
I
I
hope
want.
I hope to get to test it. I hope to get to test it is what I'll say. So we'll see.
Yeah. Like, and again, if they do come out with the redesigned iMac, I will consider it. But
Yeah, and I could even use the 16-inch. I thought about this too. The 16-inch MacBook Pro as the always-on machine
mm,
because it connects to both my displays
yeah,
and just not take it anywhere because it is bigger and heavier, sure. And there, it's I have a really good handle on it. Like it's not too big for me at all. It's not unwieldy. The only time I notice the weight is when I put it in my backpack and ride my motorcycle. It's like, oh, that thing's I added some weight to my back. But just generally using it, it's wonderful. And I always feel like I've got enough space. Like I'll take it out at a restaurant, and do some work on it. And it's wonderful. So I really do like this machine still. So
yeah. If I could
could.
put a M1X 16-inch MacBook Pro
Mhm.
with 32 gigs of RAM in my cart today, I'd buy it. But I
Yeah,
can't. Yeah.
yeah. So I could see myself doing like a low end, like the entry level MacBook Air, just for the sake
Mm-hmm.
of testing. But I hope I don't have to do that. I hope there's a review opportunity because that's what I really want to do is experience these machines
Yeah.
and not because they're not replacements yet for what I have. So,
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
cool, but I am looking at two back HomePod minis, so that's what I will go to to the
Yeah,
store to
but you haven't
purchase.
ordered a HomePod Mini yet, right?
No, because the dates slipped so fast, and I just felt like living near three Apple stores. There's a good chance I can just walk in and get them, or get them soon.
Gotcha.
And then we know what HomePods are like. They're not brand new.
Yeah.
It's a lesser HomePod, like So,
Yeah.
mhm.
I'm still excited to get mine next week, but yeah, I know what you
Yeah, yeah, cool.
mean. Just
And
finally,
it's also
obviously
Mac.
today is
Yeah,
macOS Big Sur's release date.
it's supposed to be
We
the release day. A lot of people are seeing like
problems.
17-hour downloads and stuff like that. So technically, the release date could be today plus 17 hours. Um,
Yeah. Uh,
I've ran the beta for most of the summer. I'm on Mac OS 11.0.1 release candidate 2, and I could download the 12 gigabyte file for Big Sur 11.0, but I couldn't
can't install that.
go to it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'll attempt to update my laptop tomorrow probably, and then we can talk about it on the show next week.
So yeah, let me know what launchpad icon you get, and that'll the iWork icons changed, didn't they?
Yeah, well the iWork icons that you see in that one bit of the event video, they were never ever shown on the website. Like that's leaked out from that event video as like internal icons, uh, and they look really cool in the secret internal ones. But what's shipping are just like boring white
Oh no.
icons. Yeah.
No, that's so the video has better launchpad and iWork icons.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All
That's
right.
how the cookie crumbles.
Okay.
Also, apparently, iOS 14.3 is out. So you
I've
can
been trying through the show to get to it because I've got I'm curious if it has Apple Pro Raw,
Fitness Plus.
that too,
Yeah.
but specifically to the iPhone 12 Pro, Apple Pro Raw.
Yeah, Pro
Yeah.
Raw, yeah.
And I can't get to it. I did the profile for it and rebooted and just can't see it yet. Coming from 14.2, so
So next week we will have Big Sur impressions, 14.3 if there's any new features, we'll obviously do that. And hopefully, assuming my delivery date doesn't get pushed back again, I'll have a HomePod mini to talk about.
sounds good. Awesome. All right. And that is the Happy Hour podcast for this week. We will be back next week with a new episode. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Apollo Zach. If you look at my Twitter, you can see what a 3-week old, not human, iPad Air and a smart keyboard case looks like when it falls off of a moving car at 50 miles per hour
I don't know if I want to look at that.
and gets rained
I'm
on
gonna get
and
scarred for life.
gets torn up to shreds and the next day if I can get it. It wasn't mine. It was my colleague Seth Kierkowski at Space Explored and now 905 Mac. But we went again 15 miles with it not falling off the roof, and then it fell off the roof, and he thought it was like mud flap falling off the car because it's a rental car. And then we got to my apartment about 30 minutes away, and he's like, I don't have my iPad. So he went back and looked for it in the rain, couldn't find it. The next day I went back and looked for it and found it. And man, he has Apple Care. I put all the pieces in a box for him to take to the Apple store. So
Oh dear.
yeah. So go look for that picture. You can also check out my work on spaceexplorer.com this weekend on Saturday, 7:49 p.m. Eastern Time. There is the next astronaut launch, SpaceX Crew 1 mission with 4 astronauts. The last time this happened was over the summer in May. And these are big deals. So check out our coverage there. And Mayo, you're on Twitter at
BZA Mayo.
And you also blog at
bzamayo.com. And if you're listening to the audio podcast, remember you can watch video versions of us, youtube.com/95mac. And if you're watching the video version, remember you can subscribe to the audio version in your podcast app of choice.
That's right. My move is complete. And thanks to all of the listeners who let me know about the sound last week. It's really cool to learn when you listen to the podcast.
We are aware we are on it.
Well, I mean, hopefully this was the execution there.
Yeah,
so.
hopefully this was good.
Yes. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.